So over the past few days, no, not even past few days, more like the past day, we had seen more and more conversations on social media, in particular Twitter, because everything comes from Twitter, regarding Vancouver Canucks captain Bo Horvat and a team that is apparently in the mix for him and his services via a trade. It's one that a lot of Canucks fans, myself included, still don't like after what happened a decade plus ago when the two teams met in the Stanley Cup Finals, but today we're talking about the team down there in a little bit. Boston, Massachusetts is the scene, and the Bruins are the team that we are going over and covering. Because when it comes to the recent wave of rumors that has been thrown out there into the media, it's very apparent that Boston is one of the teams that is calling and is apparently super intrigued as to the Bo Horvat trade talks. Now, there have been so many articles published about this on Daily Hive. There was one, I believe, on the Hockey Writers, I'm not too sure, but on Boston Hockey Now, there was one published by Jimmy Murphy from yesterday. This is the one we're going to be referring to for most of our conversations here. Link, as always, will be in the description if you want to go ahead and read this yourself, but the title of the article is this: Bo Horvat talks between the Bruins and the Canucks have picked up. An NHL source has confirmed to Boston Hockey Now that reports of NHL trade talks between the Bruins and the Canucks picking up recently are indeed true. According to the source that talked to Boston Hockey Now, Canucks captain and center Bo Horvat has been the center of attention for Bruins GM Don Sweeney, as he is for other GMs of other Stanley Cup contending teams. The source told Boston Hockey Now, "I know they're one of 5 really interested teams for Horvat, but obviously the price is high. Of course, these GMs want some kind of security that they'll be able to extend Horvat and bring him in with term. But can you blame him if he wants to test the market with the season that he's having right now?" And yeah, season that he is having right now, it's been very, very good for Bo Horvat, as we have talked about multiple times in the past. The guy is on pace for 57 goals and 91 total points, no longer on pace for 60 goals. Unfortunately, his goal-scoring rate kind of dropped off a little bit in the last 5 games or so, but he is still on pace for one of the best years, probably the best year he's ever going to have. Like, realistically, if the guy gets 50 goals this year and 90 points, I don't know if he's ever going to do that again, but we've talked about this multiple times, we don't need to go over it again. Either way, though, the source mentions the Colorado Avalanche, Red Wings, Hurricanes, and Kraken as the other teams interested in acquiring Horvat. Now, this isn't even the only piece of Canucks and Bruins conversation that's been thrown around there. You also had Pierre LeBrun talk about Luke Schenn and mention how the Bruins are apparently interested in him, but we already made a video about Schenn like 2 days ago, or no, yesterday, excuse me. But when you go back over to the article, it talks about the Jim Rutherford comments, it goes over Bo and the contract situation, which, again, is something we have talked about at length in several videos multiple times a week over the past few months on this YouTube channel alone. So I think most people are kind of acknowledging of what's going on here when I say that the Canucks are probably not going to be able to give Horvat the money that he wants. At least if you consider the other cap ramifications the Canucks have on their shopping block. You have Kuzmenko, who needs a contract. You have Pettersson, whom you're going to have to re-sign later on as well. Bo Horvat has priced himself so high and above the Vancouver Canucks threshold, especially post-JT Miller extension, that when Bo Horvat gets paid, it's probably not going to be Vancouver giving him the dollar amount. And so the article talks about that. It talks about the comments from Rutherford. We already discussed all this and more in prior videos the past week. But it then talks about trade returns as well. Boston Hockey Now has confirmed multiple times that the Canucks will indeed want Fabian Lysell in any trade package from the Bruins. The 19-year-old 2021 first-round pick, 21st overall, has 8 goals and 13 assists in 24 games for the Providence Bruins this season. The common belief is that it will take a first-round pick, maybe even 2, and a high-end prospect to get a deal done for Horvat on the NHL trade sweepstakes. Now, for me personally, we heard the same thing about Miller last year, so I don't really want to get my hopes too far up there, but at the end of the day, the Boston Bruins having such a shallow prospect system means that a player like Fabian Lysell is an automatic. It is a given in any sort of big-name trade involving Horvat and the Bruins. Lysell, as we had made the video about him a few years ago, talking about why I would like this guy for my favorite hockey team, was a 21st overall pick drafted out of the SHL. He was playing for Luleå, where he had 3 points in 26 games played. Now, you might say that number is pretty bad, and I could totally understand where you're coming from. It's just Fabian Lysell, back when he was was draft eligible was a bullet. He could absolutely blitz by guys. He was known as a buzzsaw. We labeled him as such in the Why I Want video, and we talked about how this guy had a really good offensive edge that didn't showcase itself off at the SHL level, but did elsewhere in pretty much every other league he played in, especially against guys his own age. He then went over to the Vancouver Giants, had 62 points in 53 games played over there as an 18-year-old, and now this season where he's 19 turning 20, he actually turned 20 today, so happy birthday Fabian Lysell. He's literally born January 19th, 2003. The guy has 21 points in 24 games played, so he is a point-per-game player. He played for Team Sweden at the World Juniors, had 0 points in 7 games, had 29 penalty minutes though, and he actually looked pretty good all things considered. It's just, when it comes to Fabian Lysell, the point production is nice, the Swedish connection, very nice, the Vancouver Giants connection, even nicer than that. But what I also wanted to turn your attention to was a Twitter thread involving Hattie K from Dauber Prospects and Cam Robinson from Elite Prospects. They went out there and talked about this entire Lysell Horvat thing, and I wanted to showcase this conversation to you here. Cam Robinson replied to an article by Rob Williams on Daily Hive talking about the Canucks and Boston thing. The emotional damage of trading Horvat to Boston should come secondary to the fact that the Bruins have almost nothing of interest to trade. No young, movable NHLers, virtually no grade A prospects, no second-round pick. Their first-rounder will be extremely late as well. Where's the draw? Nate then asks, what about Fabian Lysell? Robinson says this, he goes zoom zoom, but he's another sub-6-foot winger who is streaky as heck. He's likely a good top 9 guy, but hardly the type of piece you build around for Horvat. I've never been a huge fan. Hattie then goes out there and says this, I feel like if one single skills coach along the way had told Lysell, you aren't allowed to burn past defenders anymore, he'd have developed into a much better player. He hasn't grown his inside play or his delay game as a result. Anish then asks, hey, y'all obviously know way more about scouting players than I ever will, but shouldn't being almost a point per game in the AHL being a sign that despite some flaws in his game, he could be a legit top 6 player? I thought that's normally the sign of a top prospect. Hattie then replies, translatable production is more valuable than higher production. Lysell absolutely has to incorporate pace control into his game. Accelerate, decelerate, cut inside, hold onto the puck, cut across opponents' hands, etc. He would be so deadly with that arrow in his quiver. If he comes up against Victor Hedman, Slavin, Makar, and the like, the tools I mentioned are what's going to get him past them. Right now, he's equipped to handle slower defenders. I just don't see him being as efficient as he is in the AHL with his current toolkit. Hattie then talks about the World Juniors, saying that he actually enjoyed Lysell at the World Juniors, other lines just clicked more than his. And at the end of the day, Lysell is a fun, buzzsaw, high-caliber winger. It's just, when it comes to whether or not those traits are going to carry over into the NHL, there's a lot of skepticism that is fairly brought up in the eyes of some people that do the scout work. So, overall, even though Fabian Lysell is pretty much a given when you talk about a Horvat trade to Boston, there are likely other players from other teams that are also young that may have a little bit more certainty at being legit NHL players sooner rather than later, and who could also have themselves pretty long-term futures in the NHL. Not to mention the fact that you have Bo Horvat, who is going to need a contract extension too, a team like Boston looking for a potential replacement for Bergeron and Krejci long-term, looking at a guy like Bo Horvat alongside of a player like Pastrnak, for example, like, if Bo Horvat defines everything about him and rewrites it, just changes it from the source, and he proves me wrong, and he ends up getting 40, 45, 50 goals every single season from here on out, then man, thinking about Horvat and Pastrnak on the same gosh darn team is terrifying. Imagining Bo Horvat winning a Stanley Cup, scoring a Game 7 overtime victory in TD Garden with the crowd going wild and everything like that pisses me off. That idea pisses me off, it really does, but at the end of the day, they are one of the teams that are involved in these Horvat conversations, which is why we had to make the video here today. I know we had made videos about Boston and Horvat in the past, but this one, with the trade return included, Lysell being a mentionable piece, it's one that I think is an interesting conversation to bring up, because Lysell is connected to Vancouver through the Giants, and of course he is Swedish, so there is some probable interest there, based off of how Patrick Allvin has done his business the past little while here. But either way, talk to the comments on your thoughts about Bo Horvat, the idea of trading him to the Boston Bruins, and whether or not the Canucks could get a guy like Fabian Lysell in return. Do you think that sort of return, a first or multiple firsts, and Lysell is sufficient enough to get a guy like Horvat? Do you think the Canucks should be looking elsewhere for some other offers and seeing who else they could get in a Horvat trade instead? Or is Lysell good enough that you're like, yeah, no, I want that guy. Give me that guy, the top prospect in the Boston Bruins system. Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this Juraj Rolls 99. And bye.